when you can perceive a different environment, I think you can then achieve that environment. I was really proud of them because not only were they asking me to test the actual system, but they asked me to test the training course that teaches people how to use the system. If society valued people like me as much as they value able-bodied people, then we wouldn't have a disability pay gap.
Welcome to the Transformation Leaders Podcast. I'm Tony Lockwood, your host, and today we have a great show for you. Today's guest is Claire Dellar. Claire is a breath of fresh air, full of life and focus upon making a real difference. I'll let her explain more about her disabilities, but safe to say she demonstrates more passion and ability than most. So let me introduce you to her now.
Go for it.
Well, hello, Claire. Welcome to the Transformation Leaders Podcast. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you.
We met a couple of weeks back, didn't we, at the FSP event, when you kindly spoke about the challenges around accessibility that all organisations need to be aware of. And I remember you shared a video with me that had a massive impact on me personally that day. And I'd like to explore a little bit about that, why that was the case later on in the show. But before we get into that detail, please do share your story. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in changing transformation and accessibility.
Sure. Oh, thanks for having me, Tony. It's great to be here. So, my name is Claire Dellar, and if there's anybody watching who can't see me, I am a woman in my 40s. I'm white. I've got bright pink hair. And what you can't see from the head and shoulders that you get on a video screen is I'm also a wheelchair user. And I'm actually an accessible and inclusive design strategist. So I got involved in change and transformation actually straight out of university. And my postgraduate degree was something called experimental economics, which is basically experiments to test why people make the decisions they do and how they behave. And of course, when you learn that, you learn how to affect behavior. So I went into the field of change management and also worked on projects. And then I gradually worked my way to doing major transformation pieces, such as the merger of Norfolk and Suffolk Mental Health Trust, rollout of electronic patient records across the NHS. And now I'm actually working with NHS England to increase the accessibility of both our internal and our external systems. So not just the stuff that we as everyday citizens get to interact with, like the NHS app or the website, or maybe our GP uses the e-referrals service to send our referral to hospital, but also as somebody who is both dyslexic and has a neurological and a physical disability, I actually need accessibility in my day-to-day life. Now, I find it quite ironic that I spend my entire life as a product manager creating products such as the NHS app, GP IT systems, cancer screening systems that are accessible to the people who are using them, accessible to our patients, our citizens, our members of staff. And yet the report that I write about how accessible it is in a format that isn't accessible to me.
Yeah, and that was the video that you shared it just smacked me in the face, because that report that you shared is like most program update reports I've seen so many times. And literally, listeners, if I had the opportunity to share this video, it was so insightful, because it just was gobbledygook, wasn't it? When as a person that needed to make use of the technology to read this document, it was impossible to follow the video. And you could actually read the document. It was amazing way of just demonstrating for someone who fortunately doesn't have those challenges that other people do. You know, I used the term immediately afterwards when I was unconsciously incompetent, and by watching that 3-minute video, I suddenly became consciously incompetent. I still haven't gone through I still haven't gone through the process of understanding how to work out and do things better, but at least I know that I need to do. which is the first stage, isn't it?
But isn't that the importance of transformational change? That first of all, we become aware that there's an issue, then we investigate how the heck do we fix the issue, then we implement it, find it doesn't work perfectly, adapt it, understand our users, and eventually move to a new state where actually, hopefully, the world is a better place and certainly a more accessible one to people like me.
Absolutely. So we start this podcast off with a standard question, so that we have the context for the rest of the conversation. The question is, how do you define transformation?
Oh, so transformation is a transition to a new world, a new way of thinking about things, a new reality. So when I get my teams together, I'll often work with the strategic leadership teams in large-scale organizations, and I'll be asking them, what's driving you? What's your vision of the future? What's different? Close your eyes, imagine a new world. What does it look like? Who's there? How are they involved? What are they doing? How are they operating? How do they feel about things? What's their emotion? What's their culture? We say, action trumps reality. And when you can perceive a different environment, I think you can then achieve that environment. But if you are just focused on the here and now, you're never going to be able to transform into that new world. But it's what we're looking for when we're doing transformation projects. And to be honest, I count pretty much everything as a transformation project. People say, oh, you work in technology, you're in STEM. Yeah, I am a woman in tech. But actually, what I'm about is transformation. I'm about a new world. I'm about a world where patients are in charge of their own data. I'm about a world where I, as a wheelchair user, can get away around my hometown freely. I'm about a world where those of us who are neurodiverse, have visual impairment, have sensory impairment, whatever it is that is blocking us from being able to fully participate isn't there anymore. I've often heard it say, why do we build steps and then add a ramp? Why don't we just build the damn ramp? So that's about envisioning that future state that is new and different and feels different, and people's emotions different, as well as their behaviors and the environment that they're doing stuff in. So that's transformation for me.
Brilliant. I love it. I love the as you say, some of those examples that you gave there, where you mentioned the steps and the slope previously, and it's like, well, why would you ever put steps in? But again, as a designer, they probably think, well, actually, we can make use of a small amount of space by putting some steps in, but don't really think the consequences of that design feature in the first instance.
Absolutely.
But these days,
and then they have to add a massive ramp in, which takes up even more space.
Absolutely. And it's just, as you say, stepping back and putting yourself in the shoes of other people, your users, yes, in the widest possible, and look through their lens, can open up so many different avenues and opportunities in lots and lots of different ways.
And we talked about how transformation is that vision of the future and imagining a future and how it feels and looks and how it works. And those architects who still are building steps and then putting a ramp down the side of it, is because they're still anchored in the present, where we still have steps, because steps have been traditionally how we get into buildings or go up slopes in this country and many other countries. And actually, by having the imagination to disassociate from the present and really imagine what it would be like if the world were accessible, then we're able to actually take a completely different view of things. And it changes the whole dynamic of how things work and how people interact with stuff. And so I don't know if you've heard of the social model of disability, Tony. Have you come across that?
I haven't, no.
So various different models of disability. The medical model says there's something wrong with me and it needs to be fixed. I'm the problem.
Yeah.
Whereas the social model of disability says that the world isn't set up for people like me. It puts barriers in my way that mean I can't achieve what I'm actually capable of or interact with the world in a way that I'm capable of. And therefore, it puts the emphasis on the environment and society to actually look at these barriers. And when you fix things for people like me, you also fix things for everybody else. Now, take easy read documents, for instance. If you've got a document, I was looking at one the other week, so I was very excited about it. We're actually creating what we think is possibly the first ever guide to creating virtual reality environments that are accessible.
Right.
And such an exciting topic to be working on. And I put it into something called the Hemingway app, which tells you how complicated the language is. And it came out at reading as postgraduate level.
Right.
Now, by doing a few tweaks, putting it into an AI that I use, and asking it to write it in a way where it keeps the meaning, but it breaks it into shorter sentences and makes the language clearer and easier to read, managed to get it down to a grade 9. That means somebody who's just starting high school can read it and understand it.
Yeah.
And that just makes it easier for everybody. It's not just about me. You, Tony, you might be tired at the end of the day, and the idea of reading something so dense that it's postgraduate level, when you could be reading something that your son or daughter who's just going into high school could read. Yeah.
But I think the key message there is it's understandable for everybody, and that's the key, isn't it? It's just because you have the ability to write at postgraduate level and use long words in complex language, again, that's just almost saying, "Hey, look at me, aren't I clever?" As opposed to putting yourself in the shoes of
barrier to entry and
reading it. And saying, okay, let's look at through the lens of the reader and what makes it easy for them to consume that information and to understand it.
It's putting up that barrier that makes it, this is our club.
Yes.
And only the clever people are allowed in this club. And it doesn't take account of the fact that even the people who are in the clever club can have a bad day. You can be sleep deprived because you've got a newborn baby. You have just had a car accident and you're feeling still a bit woozy. And my partner, 52 years old, has just had chicken pox. Poor bloke. And he was exhausted by it. Yes. And so you could just be as simple as you're feeling post-viral, or you've got brain fog because you're going through menopause. Well, I can definitely relate to that one. So it doesn't even have to be about having a physical or a neurological disability. It's anybody at any time can acquire some form of access need, and it can be temporary, it can be permanent. One of the ones that really bugs me, drop curbs. Right. When you go up to the edge of a road and you need to cross over and the curb has been dropped down to the road level so you can get across, and people park across them. Yes. I'm like, how do you expect me to get my wheelchair up there? And they'll think, oh, I didn't realise there were many people in wheelchairs in Shrewsbury. And you think, well, yeah, but there's a lot of people with prams.
Yeah.
So it doesn't just help me, it helps everybody else when you make things accessible.
No, absolutely. And having a young grandson and a 8 weeks old granddaughter, we're getting into the routine of pushchairs again. And you're absolutely right. It's so frustrating when people they're just inconsiderate at parking in the way that they do, and you just need to, again, I keep saying it's the same old, isn't it? It's just open your eyes and look through the lens of other people and what their needs are. And if we did that, we'd be a really much better society, wouldn't we, as a whole, not just within the world of change and transformation, but
all of it
about the world. Yeah. So you describe
and
yourself,
that's why I do what I do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So Claire, I was looking over your LinkedIn profile, and you describe yourself as a neurodiverse wheelchair warrior, which I think is brilliant. So tell me more about the sort of things the challenges that you face on a day-to-day basis when you're working through change and transformation, and
Sure.
and then some of the things that you would want the listeners, who are people that are leading change and transformation, to take away and think about and consider how they need to adapt to what they're doing on a day-to-day basis to ensure that people like you can be fully integrated and can understand everything that's going on and have the same impact that the rest of us can.
Absolutely. And of course, I trained in benefits management and then in product management. And so I'm going to say thing, but it's very uncomfortable for a woman. You're a white guy, Tony. You're probably feeling very comfortable saying this kind of thing. I'm damn good at what I do. I don't get to spend 100% of my time doing what I'm damn good at doing.
Yeah.
Because I am constantly overcoming those barriers that society has put in place, whether it's at work, whether it's at home. At this very moment, my PA, my executive assistant, who helps me with things like, well, she's my memory, so she reminds me of what I'm doing. She'll keep track of meetings for me. She manages my inbox. She attends meetings and takes notes. She'll brief me before I'm to another meeting. If there's been like a week between meetings, I've usually forgotten everything that was discussed. Mm-hmm. I can't even remember what I was supposed to do, let alone what anybody else was. So she keeps track of those kind of things. And the other kind of things that she does for me are what I call the disability overhead. And this is why I say I can't spend 100% of my life doing what I'm damn good at. Because I am having to so say I'm going on a work trip. I'm going down to London next week. And I can't just go on our hotel system and find a hotel that's in budget, fairly close to the office, book that in, go on, grab a train ticket, or, going to do a mileage claim afterwards. I need to ensure that not only is the hotel close to the office, but there is a wheelchair accessible route from the hotel to the office. Preferably avoiding having to rely on public transport taxis, because you can't guarantee, particularly at rush hour, that you're going to be able to get on them. That the room is accessible. Not only that it has an accessible bathroom, but it has an accessible bathroom without a bath in it. Mm-hmm. Now, some hotels, their accessible bathrooms have baths in, and some of them, they're wet rooms. I can't climb into a bath. Yeah. Whereas other people who have access needs, the bath helps them, and maybe they use a hoist to get in and out. So we're doing a lot of research about the hotel. We're researching the route from the hotel to the office. I've got to make sure that I have a personal evacuation plan for the building that I'm going to be working in. That probably involves having evacuation buddies. Mm-hmm. So I have to arrange for people to be working in that office with me at that time, who've had the training on how to use an evacuation chair, how to evacuate somebody who's using a wheelchair. Then we have to make sure that I can get there. So I use wheelchair taxis. It's a government grant that pays a lot extra costs, so my employer isn't disadvantaged by employing somebody with a disability. It's called Access to Work. And they pay for a grant for me to use wheelchair taxis. But I have to arrange them, and they're pretty thin on the ground in Shrewsbury, especially when I want them to go all the way to London and then come back in a couple of days and pick me up again. So all of this organisation, I've gone on a very long story there, but that's the disability overhead. Now, my executive assistant, Eva, absolutely amazing. She has been life-changing for me, because she has freed me from doing all of that and then dealing with the nightmare expensive system afterwards that doesn't work with a screen reader, doesn't work with voice recognition, is really difficult for someone who's neurodiverse to take in. She deals with all of that, and then I can concentrate on doing what I need to do. But at the moment, she's off. She's off sick, so I'm without support at work. And at the same time, my housekeeper is off sick. Oh. So not only do I not have support at work, I don't have any support at home. So these are things that can completely derail your life. There's a fantastic book written by the journalist Lucy Webster, used to work for the BBC. She has cerebral palsy as a wheelchair user, and it's called The View from Down Here. I have blatantly stolen her title. I think it's fantastic. And she writes about how when everything's working fine, when she has her assistants and her support workers in place, everything runs smoothly. You've got to know each other, you know each other's foibles, you know who's good at doing showers, you know who's good at setting up your computer right for you. And then it all falls apart when one of them leaves, or one of them needs holiday, or one of them's off sick, and you're phoning round trying to get help and trying to see if you can get people to do extra shifts and calling on friends. And then she talks about, and I so feel this, what it's like to have to finally go, Mum, sorry, I need your help.
Yeah.
And my mum drops everything, and she's spent 4 days down here this week, making sure that I'm in clean clothes and the flat's fairly tidy and the kitchen's not going to give me E. coli. And so, I mean, my network is fantastic. I have a friend who's a chef who batch cooks for me every week. So, because I'm not very safe with knives and I don't have the energy, so he cooks me fantastic food. You know, my mum, my friends will come round. They'll do jobs around the house for me. They'll even do things like maintenance on my wheelchair for me.
Yeah.
But when that falls apart, when one of them's on holiday or one of them's sick, or it all turns into this huge worry that detracts and distracts me from doing what I'm damn good at, which is product management and accessibility. Yeah. So what do I want transformational leaders to take away from this? I want them to understand that people like me, if society valued people like me as much as they value able-bodied people, then we wouldn't have a disability pay gap, because we would have full employment of everybody who's capable and wants a job. If society valued people like me in the way they value able-bodied neurotypical people, then I wouldn't get stared at in the street, and I wouldn't get abusive rants shouted at me out of car windows, and I wouldn't get people threatening to slash my tires, because they would have grown up around people like me. Yeah. We'd have educated children with special educational needs as far as possible in mainstream schools. So the kids wouldn't be staring at me going, what's that woman doing on wheels? Because their classmates would be people with wheelchairs, or they'd know somebody in another year, or they'd know someone with cerebral palsy, or they'd know somebody with severe learning difference, and it would be normal to them. And if it were normal to them, they would think about people like me. They would consider people like me. It wouldn't be an afterthought. I wrote a blog called Accessibility is a Choice, and I had some very interesting reactions. A lot of people loved it, and there were quite a few people who said, I felt really uncomfortable because I don't feel it was a lack of choice. I just feel I wasn't educated on the topic. And I say, no. The choice happened much earlier. The choice was made by society not to educate you about people like me, not to educate you about accessibility, not to think of anybody other than the majority. So when you as a transformational leader are looking at a project, you're looking for benefits. Benefits are the measurable improvements that seen as beneficial by a stakeholder, they contribute to your organizational objective. There you go, just quoted the textbook. And those benefits are why we do projects. Yeah. They are the measurable steps, the measurable improvements that go towards that vision of the amazing future where people behave differently and feel differently and work differently and interact differently. And often the value is actually at the margins. So I recently worked on the cancer screening system for cervical cancer. And I was really passionate about making sure that we were actually making the system as accessible as possible to people who are trans, the unhoused community, and the traveller community. Because they are the three groups most likely not to get screened, most likely to then go on to develop a cervical cancer and then most likely to have a negative outcome from that.
Yeah.
And there's a whole range of reasons, part of which is communication with them, particularly with the communities that don't have a settled address. But with the trans community, a lot of it is about the ongoing trauma that they face by being medically gaslit and objectified and having people be biased against them every time they interact with the health service.
Yeah.
There's something called the trans cold. And it's like, whenever somebody who's trans goes to the doctor and they say, "Oh, I've got this skin rash," they'll say, "Oh, it must be your hormones that you're taking, or it must be, it must be because you're using a breast binder or something." And okay, go. No, it's a contact rash from getting bleach on my skin. It's nothing to do with being trans. Those kinds of ongoing traumas make it very difficult for them to engage with health services. So the benefit of being able to improve access and improve the engagement with the service from the trans community, the unhoused, and the other communities has a massive benefit, even though it's a small number of people, because they're the ones most likely to lose their lives. So it can feel like a big change for a small group, but the value is at the margin.
Yeah. You said something at the start of that process there, that discussion, that really hit home, and it's a story no, it's a story that comes back time and time again. And the point I was referring to is when you were saying that the government has put a lot of elements in place to allow you to be the best person that you can be and do the job that you're really good at. But then they've stopped when it comes to that expense management piece because they've just not thought about it. So it's almost that they've not looked at the end-to-end process, which it happens so many times in organizations. They get the first part of it or the middle part of it really, really good, but the start and the end is dreadful. And because of that, the benefit, you don't get the real benefits that you should get because they've not looked at the whole end-to-end process. I
can afford my housekeeper because I have personal independence payments. My first application for personal independence payment took me 4 months to write and was 87 pages long.
Right. Because
the form is designed for people who have a single condition that has an obvious and steady effect. I've got arthritis, I can't clean, I can't hold a knife and fork, I can't pull my own socks on. It's straightforward. I have something like, when we listed them out, it's something like 23 conditions. And they want me to list them all individually and then list the individual effects, the medication that I'm on for each of them. Well, some medication I'm on for one med covers multiple issues. Sometimes I can't tell whether I'm fatigued because of my fibromyalgia or I'm fatigued because of my heart condition.
Yeah.
I'm fatigued. Does it matter which one it is? So breaking it down in that way made it an incredibly complicated process. And there is, unfortunately, a rather cynical view in the disabled community that it's done deliberately. It's one of those societal barriers. It's part of the social model that they deliberately put a barrier in place to stop us claiming.
Yeah.
So you have to be really desperate and or have the resources to be able to actually make a claim.
Yeah, and whether that is the case or not, I suspect it's all started off by individuals building up a process, and then a process just been bolted on. No one stepped back to say, is this the right process strategically now? Yeah.
That's why I describe myself as a strategist.
Absolutely.
Because I'm looking at that entire process. And I'm not into those kinds of conspiracy theories, so I understand why people do feel that way about it and can interpret it that way. I think it's much more likely to be cock than conspiracy, but yeah, It's important to step back and look at the whole process. That's why user journeys are so important.
Yeah.
That's where I start when I'm working on a product, when I'm working on a transformation. I start with, what's the service? What are we trying to achieve at the end of this? And how do people move from it? How do they come into it? How do they interact with it? What are the various ways that it might go for them? Do you get a positive or a negative screening result in your cancer test? What happens to you then? How do you come out the other end of it? How do we make sure that you are emotionally and psychologically safe throughout that process, as well as actually following the physical medicine? And from that, I can look at it and say, okay, at which points do we currently have problems, and what are the various solutions? And it's really important to hold my team back from going for a tech solution, because often it actually isn't. Or there is a very complicated tech solution, or there's a really simple one that costs a lot less.
Yeah.
But if you have a hammer, then every problem is a nail. So it's about making sure that you're not jumping to conclusions and jumping to your obvious solution that fits your way of thinking. And that's where user research comes in. It's so important. I was doing some user testing today for one of our systems here at NHS England, and I was really proud of them, because not only were they asking me to test the actual system, but they asked me to test the training course that teaches people how to use the system. And they asked me to look at the email and the sign-up process. So we are starting to step back and have that strategic view of, how does all of this fit together? And what are the various routes through the system that somebody could take? Because nobody ever does everything the same way. Life isn't a sausage machine. You turn the handle and the sausage comes out.
No, absolutely. But I do agree that, yeah, we all get caught up in the next shiny object. I think part of that is, it's just life, isn't it?
Yeah.
But the strength is saying, yeah, that could open up some real opportunities, but let's just step back and, as you say, strategically look to say, is it taking us closer to or further away from where we said we're going to go, our vision, our ultimate strategy? And then what's the impact upon the different elements that make up that customer journey, or that whatever it is, whatever the process is? And a big part of that,
where are those benefits?
Exactly. And what do we need to do? What dials do we need to turn? What elements do we need to change to ensure that we deliver those benefits? Because just dropping in technology, to use that analogy, that example that you just provided, yeah, it might do a little bit, but what's the knock-on effects, perhaps, and often does, negate all the benefits that technology solution provides in the short term.
Yeah. System thinking is all about looking at the knock-on effects and how does it actually affect every part of the system up and downstream, not just dropping something in to fix one problem that then causes 10 more.
Yeah. And I've been in lots of organizations that do that, and I'm sure you have.
I've seen a few.
Yes, I've seen
as
a few.
Consultants, we don't tend to be brought in when things are going well.
No, I was talking to someone the other day about as people who are involved in change and transformation on a daily basis, how when we go into organizations as a customer, or into the NHS as a patient, or visiting parents who are patients and stuff, you're looking through the lens of a change stroke transformation person, and you can see all of the things that actually we did this slightly different. There might be a real benefit, and it's enlightening, but equally quite frustrating, because, as you say, things have been built up over many years. Inefficiencies have been built up over many years, but no one really ever has the chance to step back and look at it strategically from end to end. So, yeah, fascinating.
And I think one of the changes in transformation over the past decade is an understanding that it doesn't have to be a big bang. Yes, transformation is different from continuous improvement. So continuous improvement really is taking an existing process, and fine-tuning it, like taking an engine and making it more efficient to run. Whereas transformation is putting a new engine in, swapping from diesel to electric, or whatever the alternative is. And we used to think that therefore transformation had to be Big Bang. And actually, as a technologist who is an agile professional, the applicability of agile in change management is huge, because not only can you take the same principles that underpin it and in a different setting, but actually it reduces risk. And it allows you to react more quickly, because you haven't put in a map system and then found, oops, we forgot the ramp. But actually you're putting a small amount in and you test it with some real users and they go, how do I get in there? I found an issue with SharePoint on one of our tests, where I actually couldn't navigate to the button that would take me out of the page.
Right.
Because if I was tabbing in circles around one part of the page. It locked me into a loop. It's only by testing those things and doing some small area first, or even just rolling out, doing a bit of A/B testing where you only roll it out to maybe 10% of your user base or one region. You get to see what the effect is, and you get to test it in the real world. What is it? No plan survives first contact with the enemy. No system survives first contact with the users. And so agile, the methodology has really grown from what originally started as a way of building tech products into anything where you are dealing with complexity. And isn't that just the definition of change, Tony?
Absolutely.
Complexity.
Yeah.
We're in an environment where not only do we not know the answers, sometimes we don't even know the questions. We have factors that not only can we not measure, but we can't even conceive of that affect what's going on in a change. It could be something that is totally unconnected to our organisation. For example, our own organisation, NHS England, implementing a change around people's working hours, and we're not connected to. We are connected with, but we are not civil servants. But when Jacob Rees-Mogg was going around putting notes on people's desks, it was actually creating a heck of a lot of anxiety in our organisation, even though he didn't actually have any control over us. For people who can't necessarily work in an office on a regular basis, or for whom that's quite a heavy disability overhead. Getting to the office, getting around the office, coping with bright lights, with noise, with reflective surfaces that bounce light around if you're neurodiverse. Or one of my colleagues works in a secure area, and because of that, the door is incredibly heavy. He's a wheelchair user. He can't get the door open. Can't get into his own office. So that complete separate event that was happening, that was unconnected to our organisation, was massively increasing the anxiety of many of the members of the staff ability network on a topic that actually Jacob Rees-Mogg had no influence over our organisation. It's the butterfly effect, isn't it? The butterfly beats its wings on one side of the world and causes a storm on the other.
No, absolutely. And I think the whole sort of concept of agile, people, when a lot of people, when you say, oh, we're following sort of an agile approach, their mind goes into the, as you say, that traditional agile type of activity. But you need to just bring it up. It's about working with agility. And I use the satellite navigation analogy a lot. When you're doing any transformation, you dial in your end point, your North Star, your destination, as clearly as you possibly can. But from where you are to that point, the journey that you'll take is you need to be cognizant of all the things that are going on. Has there been accidents? Has there been issues that's stopping, causing traffic jams? And then having the agility to move your priorities around, move your projects around, just change things as you go through, but still know that you're getting to where you want to get to. That in my mind, that's what being agile is all about.
And that is the definition of complexity. You know, it's an environment in which you cannot predict that the input will give you the desired output, because there are unknowns. What was it, Donald Rumsfeld? Unknown unknowns.
Yes.
Like being unconsciously incompetent.
Yes.
There are those unknown unknowns. You may never actually see the accident that happened 3 roads over, and what you're actually impacted by is the diverted traffic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So not only do you not have any control over it, but you don't even see it.
Yeah.
But you have to adapt to it. Yeah. And I mean, Agile's principle is to do the minimum incremental work that delivers value, so that if you had to stop at any time, you've still added value with every piece of work you've done. And that means you don't build up these massive, big bang implementations. You make gradual changes. You enter a new policy. You change one form. You see how that form works. Then you apply the accessibility principles you learned from that one to the forms. And even if you had to stop, at least some of the forms are accessible.
Yeah.
Or you've built part of your system, and you've done so with accessible options, such as a screen reader accessible version, or one that allows for BSL translation. Yeah, you might not get all the way through. You might run out of money, but at least that person is being able to get partway through it without having to ask for help.
Yeah.
One of the things I find so frustrating, and this comes back to the social model, is that the environment and the people around me disable me more than I actually am.
Right. Interesting.
So they're doing things for me because I'm not capable of doing them myself, not because I couldn't do it if it were designed right, but because they've built it in such a way that it's impossible for me to do.
Yeah.
So I'm going to an event in a few weeks' time, and I've had a talk with the organisers. And one of the things they're going to do is make sure that the buffet is laid out on low tables. Yeah. And they're not going to put them like 3 rows deep.
Yes.
But every plate will be along the edge, which means I can serve my own lunch.
Yes.
I don't have to have somebody walk around with me filling my plate for me because I can't reach the pasta sauce at the back or whatever it is.
No, absolutely.
So it's about whether or not society is disabling me. And actually, I want to be doing as much as I can for myself. That's not to say that there isn't a beauty in dependence. You know, I have grown incredibly close with the friend who comes and cooks for me every week. Mm-hmm. And he says he gets as much out of it as I do, because food is his love language. Yeah. He's one of the best executive chefs in the Midlands. And he gets to spend a couple of hours, no stress, no pressure. There's no client at the end of it demanding perfection. We chat as he's cooking. He then will serve up dinner and we'll have a conversation, and maybe we'll play a bit of music, or we'll discuss the latest politics, or we'll have an argument about the latest thing in the news. Whatever it is. And sometimes we'll invite friends round and they'll join us, and he gets to cook for more of our friends. Yeah. And I get to socialise with more of our friends. And at the same time, that friend might, for instance, just like, get my suitcase down for me because I'm travelling next week and my housekeeper is off sick, so she's not around to get my suitcase down. Mm. There is a beauty in dependence, but it can't be at the expense of my self-worth. Yeah. And so taking away my ability to do things independently is infantilizing. It's treating me as not a full person.
Yeah. And I think what was going through my mind there is that people have put in workarounds for you as opposed to resolving the issue. Yeah. Don't worry about creating a workaround. Just resolve the issue. So in that
I know.
really simple example was just put the food at the front of the table so you can serve yourself.
Yeah.
You don't need to do a workaround. Just think about it and up front and work out
Just,
what you do.
yeah, just do it right from the beginning. And you know what? Eva, as much as I love her, and my goodness, we achieved some great stuff together, she is a very expensive, reasonable adjustment. Having an executive assistant isn't cheap. It's costing the government quite a lot in my grant. And actually, instead, if we just made my working environment accessible, I wouldn't need her, or I wouldn't need her as much. You know, so a lot of organisations, for instance, have quite legitimate concerns about the safety and security of AI. So we've been looking at putting Copilot into our organisation. But one of the concerns is that Copilot and other AIs learn from what you put into them. So if they're able to see your commercially sensitive information, or in our case, patient data, so we never put patient data anywhere near an AI, because the AI is learning from it as much as we're getting out of the AI.
Yeah.
But if we can find a safe way to put Copilot into those environments where there isn't anything that's particularly risky or insecure, or to create a version of Copilot that sits in isolation and is controlled by us, and therefore we know is GDPR compliant, I wouldn't need her to make notes of every meeting, because Copilot would transcribe it and would say, oh, and this document was mentioned, and here's the list of actions. And therefore it would be enabling me. It would be taking away those barriers that otherwise we have to have a very expensive resource, a human being sat there doing for me.
Oh, absolutely.
Much as I love her.
I said as we had the chat to plan this session that the conversation would just flow. I've just looked up. We've been at it now for just short of an hour. So I know. So I need to bring it to a close.
Sure.
But what's the one thing? What's the one message that you would want to leave the community with now around? That some of the things that you've experienced and some of the things that you would want people like us who are transformation leaders to take away from this conversation.
I loved that you said at the beginning that I'd made you consciously incompetent, and that was the foundation step that would allow you to become competent.
Yeah.
We don't have to make massive changes. Yes, of course I want things to be perfect. Yes, of course I want everything to be 100% accessible. And as change leaders, as transitional people, we're the ones who have the opportunity to change society for the better, to value people like me, and to value my life and my contribution as equal to that of anybody else. And my mere presence, I don't have to be economically productive for my life to have value and for me to have a positive life experience. So we have a massive opportunity, and with that comes a massive responsibility. But I don't want that to overwhelm people. I want people to think about that agile principle of, even if you've made one change which makes one small difference that has made things slightly more accessible for somebody, that's a win. Yeah. So I'd ask people to take away from this the necessity to keep looking, to keep challenging, to keep looking for the next improvement that we can make, and to invest in involving people like me and people with access needs in your research before you build anything or before you change something, but also that you don't have to try to fix all of it at once.
Yeah.
And I appreciate it, even if all you've done is made one document accessible or one web page. It's an improvement to me. Take the win.
Brilliant. And I made a note before I start just to make sure that we cover everything off at the end. And my note, I'll read it out. Claire, what a great discussion. I knew it would be. hopefully many more of our listeners have been moved, as I did a week or so ago, from unconsciously incompetent in this area to consciously incompetent. But if we only help one person to make that transition, this show will have been successful. And how apt was that? That's what I'd said. My end point is exactly what you've just said, and we didn't rehearse it at all, did we?
There you go. You had your vision of the future, and you weren't you weren't stuck in the past. You weren't stuck in the present. In the present, you were imagining what the future was going to look like, and the future was bright.
Absolutely. And this conversation has been very bright. So thank you very much, Claire.
And that's not just my hair.
It's your outfit as a whole. No, the content was just amazing. Thank you.
I got to 39 and I thought, I've always wanted to dye my hair pink. And I've held back because I thought, oh, as a woman, am I going to be seen as not professional? And then just as I did when it came to disability, I thought, no, my hair isn't what determines if I'm professional. The way I dress isn't what determines whether or not I'm a professional. What determines whether or not I'm a professional is whether I'm damn good at my job. And I am damn good at what I do.
Brilliant.
So I did it.
What a great way to finish. Thank you very much.
Hairstyling tips. Great.
Claire, I now know why you suggested a 90-minute session. So much valuable stuff shared today. I can't thank you enough for your honesty, your openness, and your insight. As I mentioned at the start, you took me from unconsciously incompetent to consciously incompetent within 90 seconds when I first met you. Hopefully, we've had the same reaction from our listeners today. I'd now like to introduce you to a resource that you'll just have to get hold of. Whether you're a senior executive steering complex transformations or a mid-level manager looking to make a significant impact, the Transformation Leader's body of knowledge is your go-to guide. This comprehensive resource covers best practices, strategies, and tools that will help you navigate change management challenges and drive successful transformation outcomes. Grab a copy and let me know what you think. Thank you for listening to this podcast. We're always interested in hearing from you. What do you find useful from this pod? What do you want us to explore more in future episodes? Please do press the subscribe button. It helps us to reach more people and share the experiences of all my guests. And remember, check out my new book, The Transformation Leader's Body of Knowledge. See you soon.